Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Bonnie Fuller, and I'm an advisor at BigTent. I was the longtime editor-in-chief of many mainstream women's magazines, Marie Claire, Cosmopolitan, Glamour, and Us Weekly, before I co-launched an entertainment, pop culture, and women's issues website, Hollywood Life. I ran that site as a CEO and editor-in-chief for 14 years and then sold it last summer and have returned to my journalism roots. And I'm writing primarily for state news sites in swing states in order to inform and hopefully influence citizens to vote for democracy and reproductive freedom this coming November. I am absolutely delighted to host today's discussion with Jackie Payne, the founder and executive director of Galvanize USA. At BigTent USA, we put democracy above partisanship. We are a national women-led coalition dedicated to protecting democracy, women's reproductive rights, and our children and our grandchildren's future through education and civic engagement. I'd like to introduce you to our main event today, guest speaker Jackie Payne, the founder and executive director of Galvanize USA. Jackie launched Galvanize after Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. She was deeply disturbed that a majority of white women, who are the biggest single voting bloc in this country, 38% of the electorate, voted for Trump, who is openly racist and misogynistic. And let me remind you that they voted for him after the revelation of the Access Hollywood videotape in which he bragged about grabbing women by their private parts, after 16 women accused him of sexual assault, after the revelation of his affair with adult film star Stormy Daniels, after he claimed blood was coming out of newscaster Megyn Kelly's eyes, after he stared at Hillary's backside during their presidential debate and then announced that he didn't like what he saw, and after he called Ted Cruz's wife and fellow Republican contender Carly Fiorina ugly. And this was just a slice of his sexist behavior, and yet a majority of white women voted for him. Jackie feared for the future of America, and it's no wonder. But she also felt that as someone who grew up in the Midwest, Illinois, she could have a good understanding of why these white Trump voting women made the choice they did. She spent 2 years listening to them as she gathered research, and then she launched Galvanize in 2019 with the goal of developing continually researched and tested messages delivered in video format that could influence white moderate women to vote their democratic values. Nothing could be more important in April 2024 than Jackie's work in persuading the biggest voting bloc in the country, especially in swing states, to vote for democracy as we face an urgent threat from Trump with his plans to transform America into a Christian patriarchal autocracy. So how did Jackie, an attorney by training, have the background and knowledge to create Galvanize USA? Jackie has devoted her career to advancing women globally at the Novo Foundation, to reproductive justice as the Director of Government Relations for the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and as the policy attorney for the National Organization of Women Legal Defense and Education Fund. Everyone, please meet Jackie, who will tell you all about her groundbreaking research and messaging. Take it away, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I am so honored to have this conversation with you all today and thrilled to be back with the BigTent community. It is so amazing to see how much y'all have grown in the past few years. So thank you for having me. As Bonnie shared, I'm the founder of Galvanize USA, Galvanize Action, and my non-connected PAC, the One for All Committee. And I started these organizations in response to that growing threat of authoritarianism. My goal was to fill a critical gap in the movement, to find, connect with, and move more moderate women to reliably use our civic power to help protect our democracy and advance progress for everybody. Over the last 6 years, we've developed an approach that is proven to effectively engage and persuade moderate women to do this. We've been so effective, in fact, that this year, Focus for Democracy named us as one of the top 5 best investments you can make to save our democracy. So today, I get to take you all behind the scenes to look at how we use data science and neuroscience and behavioral psychology to really understand and connect with moderate women voters. And I'll walk you through a couple of our pieces of content and our ads to show you why our messaging has been so powerfully effective with moderate women. First, I'd love for us to just acknowledge the problem. Our country is increasingly polarized. Elections are won or lost by fewer than 80,000 votes spread across just a few battleground states. Our most fundamental rights and freedoms are under attack. We saw that again yesterday in Florida. Americans are losing trust in government and faith in our elections. And 3/4 of Americans believe, with good reason, that our democracy is at risk. Years of chaos and fear and threat have left many Americans disillusioned, and that has serious consequences for the health of our democracy and the future of our country. In this critical election year, the stakes could not be higher. The polls show Trump and Biden neck and neck, with Trump ahead in key battleground states. All of the data points to a very, very close race, with the undecided folks in the middle playing a key role in determining the fate of our nation. As you heard Bonnie say, white women are the largest segment of voters nationwide. They comprise nearly 40% of all voters. And they're an even larger share of the electorate in the key battleground states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where we've rooted our efforts. In these states, there are twice as many white women voters as all voters of color combined. And white women represent the largest share of movable voters in the middle. So while our allies are doing the very important work of organizing voters of color, over the last few years, we've developed specific expertise with this essential audience of moderate white women in suburban, small town, and rural communities who are not yet entrenched on either side, not so polarized, but who will have an outsized effect on the future of our country. So what makes our program so successful? Why are we one of the best top 5 investments in democracy this year? We work at the intersection of data science, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology to figure out who is not yet entrenched in their beliefs, so who's movable, understand their values, motivations, and their barriers, what holds them back from voting in line with what they say their values are. And then we develop customized content that resonates with those values and galvanizes them to action. I'd love to start by looking at how we identify who's movable. We work with data scientists to analyze white women's voting patterns over time, and we identify the psychographic traits that are most correlated with and predictive of our voting behavior. We then create a model that gets applied to the entire universe of registered voters. Here you can see some of the traits that are most highly correlated with white women's voting behavior. We found that by using these traits, we could group voters into 5 different clusters that share a lot of the same attributes and tend to respond in similar ways to messaging. You can see right here, the top 3 traits are internalized sexism, outgroup derogation, which means a willingness to blame the other, and racial resentment. For simplicity's sake, let's just look at those 3. What you can see here is that the folks who rank very high in these traits tend to be conservative and reliably vote red. Those who rank very low in these traits tend to be progressive and reliably vote blue. Because these groups are more entrenched in their beliefs, we don't include them in our target audience. Instead, we focus on our energy on the 3 clusters of women who fall in the middle. Each of these groups holds similar traits and beliefs and values, and that allows us to custom tailor our approach to each cluster. Using this approach, we've identified 44 million moderate white women nationwide in those middle 3 segments. These women are potentially movable, and 7.1 million of them live in battleground states. So when I see this slide, what I feel is 44 million reasons to hope for our democracy. As extreme and divided as things can seem, the reality is that there is a huge opportunity with this audience when we genuinely understand and connect with them. And because our elections are determined by such razor-thin margins, in the short term, we don't need to get all 44 million of these women to join us. Just a tiny percentage of this audience in a handful of states will determine the future of our elections. We've spent years talking with our audience and, more important, listening to them, working with our team of researchers, neuropsych experts, and social workers to understand our audience's values, motivations, and barriers, and the issues they care most about. Based on that research, we identified that their top values include compassion and fairness, that's a little hard, patriotism, being faithful to this country and putting it first, and then in-group care. This is their number one priority to protect their children and family. We match our messages to the voters' core values. That is core to our approach. We do not ask our audience to change their values. We offer them ways to hold pro-social positions that are congruent with their own values and sense of self. And we help them overcome any barriers to holding that position. We do this by engaging with our audience on an ongoing basis about the issues that matter most to them. As you'll hear, that's going to be mostly economy and repro. And we help them to work through any disinformation or grievance-based narratives that they're being inundated with and that threaten to pull them to a strongman leader. This year, we're connecting with over 7 million moderate women in two ways. First, through our nonpartisan community program that fosters long-term engagement through compelling cultural content. And second, through our digital persuasion ads that are proven to shape perspectives and positions on key issues and on candidates. I would love to introduce you to our new community program, Galvanize Together. We launched this last July, and the goal here was to build trust and long-term relationships with our audience by connecting with them on what they care most about in a format that they find entertaining, engaging, and worth spending their time on. Remember our audience's core values was in-group care. That's their number one value. Sorry. It should be no surprise then that what our audience thinks most about is their relationships with husbands and ex-husbands and parents and children and grown children and friends. Those relationships take up a lot of mental and emotional space. So we meet our audience there with emotionally compelling content that offers them tangible support and keeps them coming back for more. We currently have several core features in our programming, which we send to our subscribers via text message. An advice column called Dear Grace, community conversations called In Focus, and engaging polls and quizzes that get them to think about what they think and take a position. All of our programming is designed to address that trait we saw at the top of our chart, internalized sexism. This is one of the primary barriers that women report is holding them back from voting in line with their values. Working with neuropsych experts, we intentionally built a community program that builds up our members' civic knowledge, confidence, and agency, addresses their fear and feelings of isolation, provides social proof that other women in their in-group share their views, which provides a permission structure and support that it's safe to act on these values. We already have had 127,000 women subscribe since July, and we're now gaining subscribers at a rate of 1,000 women per day. And even though we're growing so quickly, we're maintaining a 77% retention rate. So women are liking what they're seeing and they're staying. At this rate, we're on track to be at 250,000 subscribers by fall, and we're well positioned to scale up in the months ahead. I want to just kind of deep dive into two of those program components. One is Dear Grace. Grace is a research-informed advice column that speaks to our audience's interests and experiences in a very nourishing and supportive manner that makes them want to come back for more. The programming offers audience content they care about in a format that is entertaining and relatable. So women tune in, they read the questions and reflect on Grace's advice, and they think about what they think. This is such a crucial step to overcoming that internalized sexism and to building confidence and civic agency. I'm looking at this issue. How do I feel about it? What do I think? Grace makes our readers feel seen, reminds them they're not alone, and offers constructive solutions. And most importantly, I think Grace encourages them to advocate for what they need, whether it's getting their husband to pick up his socks, which is a very serious issue, or telling Congress to fix the childcare crisis in America. Grace goes there with them. In the last few months, we have received thousands of letters to Dear Grace asking for help to make sense of the world and navigating their own life. Grace recently responded to a question about how to handle an unplanned pregnancy, and she provided a pro choice answer, making it clear that we support women no matter what they decide, whether they choose to continue that pregnancy or to terminate it, while also linking to a map so that readers have the opportunity to learn about the state abortion bans from a trusted source. 100% of the readers, including those who said they would not personally consider an abortion, agreed that Race's compassionate pro-choice response, and one that gave political knowledge and information tucked in there, got it right. Next, let's take a quick look at our community conversations. So every month we pick a hot topic that our research shows our audience is concerned with, and we create the opportunity for members of the community to convene online and discuss it. Our in-house social worker works with our research team to develop a discussion guide, and then she moderates these Zoom conversations and leads the group through a values-based discussion of the issue. This is much like a deep canvassing conversation. We record those conversations and then text clips out to the community at large so that all the women in our audience can participate vicariously. They watch the conversation, they reflect on what they think, they have those positions validated by other women in their in-group, and ultimately they share their perspectives back with us after watching the clips. In October, we held sessions focused on childcare, and I'm going to show you a clip in a second that we sent out to the entire community. After watching this clip, nearly 1 in 3 women in our group responded, and we received over 20,000 submissions in 3 weeks from members telling us how their life would be better if they had the childcare they needed. So let's watch this little 90-second clip.
I mean, I do feel like we are Wonder Woman in our own way, just because of what we do for our families. Being a single mom, at one point I was working 4 jobs just to try to, raise my son, pay for childcare, pay the bills, because I'm not one to ask for help. And plus I take care of my dad on top of it too. So it's kind of I don't know. It's like, I'm going to get emotional. I'm sorry.
But you're not alone.
And I was thinking how different your life might be if there was paid parental leave or free access to childcare.
Your kid's in the hospital. You shouldn't have to choose between your child or the job. And I mean, it came down to my child.
For most of my children's lives, I was a waitress, making $2.83 an hour, getting no benefits because they won't give you full time. Like, I might have been able to not work as a waitress. I might have been able to go to school and get a better education. My life and my kids' lives could have been a lot different.
I just want to say, you both sound heroic to me. I hear both of you being Wonder Woman and a warrior in your own lives.
So many of the women we've talked to say they feel alone in their views, and you hear that in the conversation, and that they avoid talking about politics and current events because they are averse to conflict. Watching guided conversations like this allows women to try on other points of view, arrive at their own position, and receive validation and social proof that other women in their group agree. This helps us to address some of those barriers that women have to standing up for what they value and believe in, and it makes us feel safe to take action in line with those values. When we tested this clip, that 90-second clip, we saw that it moved moderate women 13 percentage points. Sorry, Kelly. It moved women 13 percentage points toward an agreement that even if I wouldn't personally benefit, I'd be willing to increase taxes if the money goes to federally funded childcare. So you can see that seeing this kind of conversation of women in their own group really supports this pro-social movement towards let's get people the childcare support they need. Our second strategy for connecting with our audience on the issues that matter most to them is through our digital ad campaigns. Proactively, what this means is talking to our audience about economy and reproductive freedom and democracy. And we'll see why in a second. But we also track the culture wars that are designed to polarize to evoke fear, and to drive our audience towards a strongman leader. Without intervention, these grievance-based narratives pull our audience away from progress. So we combat that disinformation and inoculate against these attacks with values-based ads that offer hope. And then we return our audience's attention to the things that they do care most about, like economy. Let's look at that a recent survey that my PAC, the One for All committee, did. We do regular research on the issues impacting women's vote choice. And in this slide, you see when my PAC asks white women overall, what is the number one issue you think about when you think about voting this fall? The economy is always the top issue for the most women in our group. Here, what you see is 36% of white women said economy is their number one issue. This is consistently the case. Our audience is worried about making ends meet, and they want to know that a candidate cares about their family and will deliver for them. You can see here, abortion is right now in the number 3 spot. 11% of white women say abortion is their number one issue. That might surprise some of you because it feels like maybe it would be higher. I just want to say from a perspective, that's quite a bit higher than it was in the days when I worked at Planned Parenthood, the days before the Dobbs decision. And it has crept up over time since Dobbs. So you're seeing 11% of white women say it's their number one issue. Of course, these issues are not mutually exclusive. There are scores of women who named economy or healthcare or democracy as their number one issue, who also care very much about protecting reproductive freedom. Roughly 3/4 of white women say it's one of the core factors that they're going to be considering this fall. You also see that democracy is tied for third here. In addition to persuasion programming on key issues, we need to build faith in our elections and the value of voting and civic engagement, because we want women not only to vote in November, but we want them to stand up and defend our democracy in January 2025 and beyond. A quick note about immigration. You see that immigration here is listed as the number 2 issue for white women overall, and it's the number 3 issue for moderate white women. This is a spike in recent months, and that's not really a surprise. We see authoritarians the world over use immigration as their primary tool to stoke grievance towards the other and fear of the other. When it's combined with narratives around crime, which we're seeing right now in the US, it stokes fear, instability, and insecurity. This is a really effective tool at peeling off segments of moderate women, and that's why we see it in the cultural narrative right now. It's also why we track what are the effective culture war grievance-based narratives that the right is using, the far right is using, that is designed to move more moderate women to authoritarianism. And we address those. Let's now take a turn towards looking at some of these messages that work and why they work. I'm going to show you, I think, maybe 4 ads. These are 30-second ads. The first one's an economy ad. What you'll see here is this is a focus on the care economy. When women talk about the economy, they're trying to make life better for their family. They're not thinking about the GDP or stocks in the abstract. They're thinking about affording childcare and elder care and healthcare and prescription drugs, right? So we focus on those elements of the economy, and we always combine that topic, economy is their number one issue, with what we learned about what their core values are: compassion, in-group care, fairness, etc. And then we use some key lessons from neuropsych about how the brain works so that we can work with the brain to create effective opportunities for people to consider the information that they're being presented with, right? In the field, those are called persuasion windows, but really it's just creating an opportunity for the brain to consider the new information. Let's watch this ad.
Having been a working single mom, I know it isn't easy. Cooking dinner, sports practices, homework, you name it. That's why I've dedicated my career to supporting families at a program that gives free childcare to single working moms. We've all struggled at times. If the government and businesses work together the way they do with Social Security and other programs, we'd all be better off. Every family deserves this kind of support.
So this ad, when we test all of our messages and our ads rigorously, this ad moves suburban women to be 18 percentage points more supportive for the idea that the U.S. economy can't thrive until the federal government makes childcare more affordable for all families. And the reason that that works, number one, you see saliency in this. You see the audience can picture themselves in this situation, playing soccer with their kids in this kind of household in the hectic morning, right? It feels very relatable, feels like me, and it's my in-group that's being portrayed. The messenger is a very relatable messenger, someone I can trust, someone who has a life like mine, and who I think, oh, if she thinks this, it's okay if I think it too. Lastly, in our research, we saw, we did some deep dive research into childcare because we saw that everyone says that they support it, but then we have a little trouble getting people to get off the couch and demand it. Why aren't we demanding this in this country like in other countries? And we found that internalized sexism was really at play here, is holding women back from demanding it, because deep down, many of us have this internalized barrier to asking for help. You heard that in the focus group conversation. We have this feeling like we should be able to individually do it all without asking for help. So this ad addresses those underlying emotional barriers around undeservingness, talking about you deserve it. And ultimately, we all want what's best for our children. So kind of get over yourself and focus on the children, because we all want what's best for them. And that helps us sidestep that barrier and actually demand support for childcare. Now let's turn to reproductive freedom. I'm going to show you two ads here. Since Dobbs, as we've discussed, reproductive freedom has been rising in salience for women. And our audience, our allies are going to work to mobilize the base, the women who say it's their number one issue. They're dead certain that this is the most important thing. Our allies, my old colleagues at Planned Parenthood, will mobilize those folks. Our job is to connect with the moderate women for whom this is one of the many concerns that they have, and we'll highlight the stark contrast between the options in front of them for what kind of future they want for themselves and their children, their daughters. When it comes to abortion, many moderate women feel conflicted about the issue for themselves. They don't imagine that they would make that choice, but they are not conflicted about what they want for a loved one who decides to have an abortion. On that, they are crystal clear. So in our reproductive freedom ads, we lean into that in-group care, that compassion, and that fairness, and that helps women move directly to, I want to support access to abortion, and I'm going to oppose anyone who doesn't protect it. One of the key ways to build support for reproductive freedom for this audience is to focus on miscarriage and IVF. These are issues that are more relatable to women. They may have had experience with themselves, and they have immediate connection to and empathy for. After seeing this miscarriage ad, which I'll show you next, women are significantly more likely to say they'll only vote for a candidate who will defend abortion access. So even though the focus, the emotional content is on miscarriage, or we have one coming up on IVF, that's the way into the issue. But when we measure the success of it, it is, will this cause us to defend abortion access? So let's watch this ad.
12 weeks into my second pregnancy, I found out my baby no longer had a heartbeat. My husband and I were devastated. I ended up taking medication to complete the miscarriage instead of having a procedure. That felt like the best choice to honor my pregnancy. Being able to make that choice for myself with my doctor and loved ones was so important to me. That's why I'm only voting for leaders who will ensure everyone has the opportunity to make their own decisions about their bodies and lives.
So this ad moved suburban women to be 7 percentage points more supportive of only voting for elected officials who will fight to defend abortion access. And it moved voters who have some college, which is a primary target right now. Those voters moved 14 percentage points more supportive on this issue after seeing this ad. Let's look at a second abortion ad. This one takes a slightly different approach. It's still tapping into that compassion, but it really leans into the value of fairness. So let's watch this, and you can listen to those values as they come up in this ad.
These new abortion policies have been absolutely terrible for women. You've got women being denied abortion medication, becoming infertile because they can't get treatment for miscarriages, and publicly shamed for aborting due to medical complications. It's just not fair. These abortion policies don't know our circumstances or our reproductive needs. We need to trust women, families, and doctors with these decisions.
So this message moves moderates 9 percentage points to say that any law that restricts abortion access is unfair. And it moves women who say they are against abortion but support it being legal even more. Those women moved by 11 percentage points after seeing this. Finally, I want to show you a democracy ad. In addition to, as I said, in addition to persuading on the particular issues, we really need to be engaging women on the issue of being civically involved, voting, supporting our democracy for its own, on its own. This ad we designed and it tested very well with our younger audience, and it moves moderate women 13 percentage points to believe that they can make a difference. So let's watch how we did that.
They tell us change can't happen, that we're stuck with the same old, no matter what we do. With so much going on, it's hard to know what to focus on. But we've seen what can happen when people decide to stand up for what they believe, for what really matters. So this year, when so much is on the line, we are going to put down our phones and cast a vote, because change can happen if we make it.
And this is just as a reminder to y'all, if none of those ads really spoke to your soul, just remember that it might not be your soul that we're talking to, right? We really micro-target our tailored ads to the people who need to see them. People often ask us, where do we deliver these ads? How do people actually see them? We don't waste any money on linear TV ads. Rather, we use media and consumer data to see where our audience is spending their time, what shows they're watching, what social media they're into, and we place our ads in front of them. So we'd use what are called over-the-top ads that pop up between episodes on streaming sites and smart TVs. So you might see one of our ads before viewing that next episode of Yellowstone. We place our ads on social media. This year, we'll be delivering them on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. And then we also use something called pre-roll, so our audience sees them before their online content, their online content plays. By using multiple platforms and strategies, we're able to effectively saturate our audience with effective programming, and we don't waste money spending it where they're not going to see it. So why am I so confident that our approach works, that long-term engagement on the issues that women care about using their values frames is so effective? Because we rigorously test it every single step of the way. Through our award-winning research, we've proven that this approach achieves unprecedented persuasion effects with exceptional cost efficiency. In the midterms, we ran a 7-month in-field randomized control trial to test the efficacy of our programming. And as you can see here, we increased support for protecting abortion, decreased the blame folks placed on Biden and the Dems for inflation, and returned dramatic shifts in Democratic vote choice. This is the reason that Focus for Democracy lists us as one of the top 5 best investments for democracy this year. So we'll continue to focus our energy in our priority states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, given the incredible size of our audience there. It just makes a ton of sense for us to continue to be there. And we're positioned to scale our impact if we get the additional support we need and through our partners in these other states. There is no doubt that our unique approach works. The question is only whether we'll be able to scale up in time to defend our democracy. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share our work with you today. And Bonnie, I'm super honored to be here with you and excited to hear your reactions and any questions you and others may have. Thank you so much.
Jackie, thank you so much. It's absolutely fascinating what you're doing. And I myself have lots of questions, and I know that people in our chat do. Just some basic things to start. So right now, you're just focused in the 3 biggest swing states. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. If you get more money, you'll be able to start to, where would be the next states that you would go into?
Yeah, so our C3, our community program is actually national. So we're doing that across the whole country. But when we think about running our ads, our top tier states are Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That's where we've always been. We'll continue there for sure. Then we have a whole list, and we can put that, perhaps we can put that slide back up. But what we're looking at there in Galvanize Action, my C4, and then ultimately my PACs, we're looking at what are the other states that we should be in, those battleground states where the margins are really small and where we want to make a difference by turning out more moderate white women to defend democracy and advance progress. So you'll see there that some of the other battleground states that folks are paying attention to: Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina. And then there's states like Montana and Ohio that have critical Senate races and House races as well. Oh, I should mention, I saw a couple folks from Maine on this call. Welcome, Maine. And so we'll be looking at Nebraska too and Maine too as two critical places where we could, my PAC could pick up an electoral college vote and make a real difference to the community of women living in those states.
And how do you know, like you're saying that the persuasion moves certain percentage points?
Mhm.
How do you know that that actually translated into their votes? Like, I know you have the control study versus randomized people, women.
Yeah. So, right. So the first thing we do is test all our messages in the lab. So we have a treatment and a control group, and we say, what do we think this is going to work? Yes, the message works. Then we make an ad, then we test the ad that way. Oh, it looks like the ad's going to work. Then we run it to real people on the ground. And then we do an infield study that is a treatment. Some of the people, in 2,000 women got the treatment, and then the other half, a randomized control trial, didn't. And then we asked those women who were in real life seeing our ads and the ones who weren't, we asked them, who did you vote for on the eve of the election? And what we saw is, what's the difference between the people, otherwise they're exactly the same, it's a random sample, right? What's the difference between the people who we treated with our ads and the ones who we intentionally did not send our ads to? What's the reporting difference in who they say they'll vote for? That's how you know how effective the ads are.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, Jackie, what are the ages of the women that you're reaching, and how do you message in a way that speaks to both a middle-aged mom of 3 and a college student?
The secret is not to try the same message to both, right? So we micro target our ads to our custom audiences based on what they care most about. And what we see remember that slide with the 3 different segments in the middle, those tend to break down. They're created by psychographic traits, but they tend to break down by age as well. So we have one of those segments is an over 65-year-old segment. That segment tends to vote a little bit more liberal. They're over 65, but they're also very sensitive to culture war narratives around crime. They live alone, they're nervous. So we have to hold them and talk to them about that. The middle group tends to be kind of a middle-aged. And I feel like whenever I talk about white women, everyone imagines I'm talking about someone my age, right? So I want to expand your thinking about that. We've got a third of the group is older, over 65. We've got the middle-aged ladies. And these women tend to be a little bit more conservative. And then we've got our under 35-year-olds. And the interesting thing about the under 35-year-olds is they actually really split. We have a third of those under 35-year-olds lean more conservative, a third of them lean more liberal, and a third of them don't vote. No matter what they think, they feel really skeptical and doubtful that voting is going to make a difference. So for them, we really have to talk to them about it matters if you vote. That's why we made that democracy commercial for that audience. Those women, what we saw when we talked to them about reproductive freedom, they were very upset with Dobbs. They want to protect abortion access, but they said to us, I'm not going to vote. I'm going to go volunteer as an abortion doula. And we were like, let's do both. Let's do both. So for them, it's a different thing. So So basically it's every age group from 18 to the end. Um, but what we're doing is talking to each group about what matters most to them, what's their life experience, what's consuming their heart and mind right now, and we tailor it to them. So we might be talking about their child if they're in the under 35, or their grandchild if they're the, over 65, but we're talking to them in a way that resonates with their life experience.
Just to follow up on what you just said about there's this group of young women that think, oh, I'm really upset about abortion, but I'm not going to vote. Do they give you reasons? Like, that seems to be the most obvious thing to do, is to vote against politicians that are taking away their freedom.
For that group, what we did some deep dive research on that, and what we're hearing from them is a feeling like candidates know that we're struggling. Elected officials know that we're struggling. They don't care. They don't care about me. The biggest challenge we see there is I don't matter. No one cares about me. So that's the barrier we have to address with them. People do care about you. You do matter. You do have agency, and you can help change the direction of this country if you participate. And actually, around reproductive freedom, that is one of the best examples of an issue that we can use because it is so concrete. It is hard to think, if I vote for this person, I can see how my gas prices are going to go down. That feels more, who knows what that line is. But on reproductive freedom, it's pretty direct. If I vote for this person, he's going to vote to ban abortion. If I vote for this person, he's going to vote to support it. And so that the how tangible that connection is an asset to us right now, and we're able to talk about that and use it.
What are the other messages around the economy that can make a dent in how these women think, since the economy consistently shows up as the top factor they're concerned about, but it's such a broad subject and they're not really seeing that, the fact that unemployment is low and wages are up, it's still not helping them with their grocery bills. So they're blaming Biden. So what kind of messaging is helping to persuade them?
Yeah.
So they are being helped.
So what I'd say there is, the most important thing is that people believe someone is looking out for them and their family. That is the challenge that we have to address. When in 2022, when you saw that in-field randomized control trial, you saw we had really powerful effect at shifting who people blamed for rising inflation. So we shifted their blame away from the Democrats and Biden towards greedy corporations, right? Because people are feeling pain. They need to know who to hold accountable for that. And so we were able to shift the blame from Biden and Democrats to these greedy corporations who are really price gouging and, living high while they're struggling. So shifting the blame is one tactic that we use. Another thing that we do, and you saw that in so many of our ads, it's women telling true stories about how their life has been made better because someone is looking out for them. So that a candidate or an elected official is actually working for them. So if you go to our YouTube channels and look at all of our ads, what you'll see is there are women telling stories about how during COVID, when Biden did the child tax credit, it saved their bacon. Like, their husband lost his factory job and she struggled, but the child tax credit helped them make ends meet. And that was evidence that Biden's looking out for them and making life better, and that government can do that, right? So depending on how we're talking to them, we're kind of shoring up that notion that you deserve this. Government can do something about it. Government is doing something about it. And even if life isn't perfect, we never pretend like people aren't struggling. We meet them exactly where they are, but we have other women in their in-group say, but this really did help me. And I see that. And when people reflect on that, they're like, okay, that's great. It's great to know that government is doing something for people in my group, and that I see that and I appreciate it.
Well, there's also, like, you have a lot of ads on childcare and on the need for it, and that women need to be validated, that they can expect government to do that. And I guess, we also now have, the Republicans talking about cutting Obamacare, getting rid of it, Social Security, Medicare. I mean, these are all things that help these women, how do you message to let them know that these kind of things, not only will they not get childcare, but all the rest of these things could be taken away that will make their lives, their economic lives harder.
Yeah. So I see some questions in the chat around what does the C3 do? What does the C4 do? So I'll answer that in response to this question. So anything we do in our C3 is nonpartisan. We are just shoring up the notion that this is an issue, you deserve it. Government can play a role here. So that is part, you saw that in the In Focus conversation. There we're just saying, you deserve this help. What if you had this? It's something government can do for you. You deserve it. Ask for it, demand it. You got this, girl. Right? So that's what the C3 is doing. It's validating that notion that you deserve this and government can help. The C4 is has the ability to be a little bit more political, and it talks about what do candidates do, what does elected officials do, what do you demand. So that's where you might see an ad that says, I won't vote for any candidate who doesn't support abortion or reproductive freedom, right? And so you see it's a little bit more political. And then separately, my PAC, which is disconnected from those two, my PAC says this particular candidate, whether it's President Biden or someone else, this particular candidate shares those values and will actually do what you expect from the government, right? And so I hope that answers both the questions in the chat around what entity, but also when we think about economy. So what we're doing is talking to women, they care very much and feel some agency over things like childcare, elder care, prescription drugs, healthcare. That is what consumes them. They're worried about their children's health. We hear women talking about, I did everything right and my kid broke his arm. And even with some insurance, I'm $5,000 in debt. And do you know how long it's going to take me to pay that off? Right. So they're worried about that part. And what we can say is, look at, this is what you deserve from government. Government should be protecting your healthcare. You shouldn't go into bankruptcy over your kid breaking his arm. And let's look at the candidates and see who is good, who's offering to protect your family and who is offering to protect the very wealthy and rob your family of those kinds of protections.
So that's part of your, not the ads, but discussions that you have.
Well, it's part of the candidate part is that's a more political piece, so that needs to be off to the side. The first part is, what do you deserve? What do you expect from government? And what is government doing that you can celebrate and be happy to see that folks are doing things that protect you?
Now, some people are asking about budget and what you need to scale up.
Thank you for asking that question. So right now we are buying our C3 ads and C3 ad space, and we'll be running those starting in just about a month, starting in May. And I'm actually trying to raise $7.9 million to get those ads out to that entire map you saw. So if we want to scale and get to all these places and get those ads in the hands of 7.1 million women, we still have a gap of about $7.9 million. The C4, that won't start until this summer. There we have a gap of just over $14 million. And then my PAC, which won't do its business until the fall, the PAC has a gap of $17 million. If those numbers seem big to you, just know that literally every $2.50 helps. Every $2.50 gets an ad in front of a voter for the 8 weeks, for the period of time they need to see it, so that it's effective for them. So, yeah, I hope folks will, I don't mean to make an ask, but since you did ask about the gaps, like, do what's meaningful, it adds up and it will make a difference.
We also have some questions about the war in Gaza, and if that's something that has come up in your discussions with women, and if you're doing anything in persuasion in any way.
Great question. So we look at this question. We are doing some new research right now. Actually, it might even be in the field, looking at what are the issues that are on top of mind. And that's one of the questions we're looking at. When I looked at, everything we do is open source and we share with our colleagues. When I looked at some of my colleagues' research a few months ago, This was not an issue for moderate white women voters. I was looking particularly across the Midwest and then looking specifically at Michigan, given some concerns about how that issue was coming up in Michigan. And what we saw there was, based on our colleagues' research, that moderate white women were at that point still net positive on protecting Israel, and this was not an issue for them. We will continue to research this and look at it so that if it becomes an issue, we know how to handle it for our audience.
On the issue of reproductive freedom, are you seeing that talking to women about who've lost providers? Like, are you doing any messaging with women in states that have lost providers and how that's affected them? Like, in terms of the women who are, I mean, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania right now still have access, but they're under threat, particularly Wisconsin. So are you finding that that's effective at all?
It's not so much about losing providers per se. The way that we've talked with them, and first of all, remember that women don't think about it as like it's going to affect me. It's easier for them to think about it how it will affect someone I love. So that's just by focusing that way, it makes it easier for them to take a stand. You may feel that in yourselves. Like I find myself, it's much easier for me to protect someone I love sometimes than stand up for myself. So it's more about the someone I love. And then secondly, one thing we are looking at is how attacks on providers, how they feel about that. So in Idaho, there's a law that says, that really it punishes emergency room providers who give care to women who need abortion access for their health, but not to save their life. And that's the kind of thing that our women love authority figures like nurses and doctors. They appreciate them. And it taps into that feeling of this is so unfair. This nurse or doctor is just trying to help someone in the emergency room and she's going to be punished. This is a bridge too far. That's not fair. So that's the kind of approach that has some traction.
Now, you found that disinformation in your research, that disinformation, particularly on Facebook, has been very effective in convincing women that the border's in crisis, that immigrants are dangerous, that Biden has aging issues, and that Kamala Harris is unqualified. What type of messaging have you found effective against these widespread beliefs?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. As I said in my earlier remarks, this is the weapon that authoritarians use. So we study authoritarianism worldwide and across history. And what we see is authoritarians try to use this grievance-based disinformation that make us fearful of the other. That typically takes the form of claiming that immigrants are a threat, and then also that this gender invasion is a threat. So you see that around whether it's abortion access, women's rights around abortion access, or around LGBTQ access to rights. And so that's what we see globally. And we're really seeing that here in the US. And when we track what are the narratives the right is using that is effectively, women see them, believe them, and it starts to move them to the right. Immigration is that biggest threat. And we do see some of these threats around claims around trans youth or some of the other gender equity stuff we're seeing. Those are effective because they make people feel nervous and fearful that their norms and values are being disrupted, and they're not sure how the world is working anymore. And they feel like, I don't know who my people are, who has my back, who shares my values. So that's what we see. That's why those attacks work. What we do is really meet women right there. We don't demand that they are in a certain place that's like, perfectly, solidly somewhere. Like we just meet them where they are and we say, okay, this is how you're feeling. You're a little bit worried about this. You're trying to make sense of the news you're seeing. How can we connect with you and say, who are you as a person? You're a loving and compassionate person. This is what you want for America. So if that's who you are and how your values, then how do you look at that issue, right? So we kind of turn down the heat on the fear and threat, and we offer them an opportunity to remember who they are, to tap into their own compassion and their hopes for America. And that kind of approach, that kind of messaging, we test against the right's really ugly culture war stuff, and we show it proves to inoculate against those messages. It basically just takes them off the table, so women aren't worried about these made up threats anymore, and allows them to think, like, just say, like, let me think about what I really do worry about, which is making ends meet and things like reproductive freedom.
Jackie, the work that you and your group are doing is just fantastic and so helpful. And I think we're all hoping that it has tremendous positive impact on what happens in this upcoming election. We'd like to encourage people who've attended to check out the Galvanize USA website. Thank you all for participating. Thanks again, Jackie.
Thank
And
you.
thank Big Tent.